Hello and welcome to day 4 of Jane Austen Week. Today I'm going to be talking about Persuasion. I cannot believe Persuasion is so low down on my list. I love Persuasion so much. Basically, from here until Sunday, the last 4 books I'm talking about, I love them all incredibly. They are some of my 4 of my favourite books of all time, and I want them all to be like near the top. These last 4 books are just brilliant books. I love them all. So even though Persuasion is down as being like my 4th favourite Jane Austen novel, it is so good. I love it. I have nothing bad to say about Persuasion at all. Oh wow, what a book. Anyway, Persuasion takes as its heroine Anne Elliot. Anne Elliot is a bit older than most of the rest of Jane Austen's heroine, being of a grand age of 27, which of course in the early 19th century meant you were nearly past it, effectively an old maid and probably not likely to get married. Aren't we glad we don't live in the 19th century? The basic premise of Persuasion is this. About 7 or 8 years previously, Anne Elliot was engaged to a man called Frederick Wentworth. She was very in love with him, he was very in love with her. However, her godmother, Lady Russell, persuaded Anne not to marry Frederick Wentworth, saying that he didn't have an establishment, he was a poor young man, they were both too young, and Anne Elliot was persuaded to break off the engagement. 7 years later, at the start of the book, Anne Elliot's father, a baronet, has spent all his money. Him and the eldest daughter, Elizabeth, who is not married, just live quite badly. Anne Elliot is the only sensible one, and so they have to pack up their estate, rent it off to someone else, and move to Bath. And the people they rent the estate to are Admiral and Mrs. Croft. Mrs. Croft turns out to be the sister of Frederick Wentworth. Before they move to Bath, Anne Elliot goes to see her other sister, who is married and lives fairly nearby, and while there she meets again Frederick Wentworth, who she has not seen for 7 years. And the rest all carries on from then. Anne Elliot is a really interesting character in terms of overall Jane Austen. Like some of her other characters, like Fanny Price or like Eleanor Dashwood, she is quieter and sensible. She is not witty like Lizzie Bennet or like Emma. She is not like that at all. She is very quiet, very sensible, very kind of restrained, but also she knows exactly what to do when she has to. She is sensible like Eleanor, but she is much wiser than Eleanor and always knows what to do in a crisis. There are several points in the book where sort of bad things happen or crises happen, and Anne Elliot is there to know exactly what to do. She is really strong and really admirable in that sense, and that's something I really like about Anne Elliot in the character, is that even though she is suffering and she is quiet, she is not weak. She is very complicated and very strong and great, and I really like her as a character. She's one of my favourite Jane Austen heroines. I think she's wonderful. I'm also very fond of Captain Wentworth. I think he is a lot of people's favourite Jane Austen hero because he is you know, wonderful, and he's not as proud as Mr. Darcy, and he doesn't really have many flaws apart from maybe like stubbornness, but I just think he is a great character. I think it's true. I prefer Mr. Knightley, but I'm very fond of Captain Wentworth. He's probably like my 2nd favourite Jane Austen hero, and he's done so well, and he's such an interesting character, and I really love the kind of awkwardness and tenderness between Anne and Captain Wentworth throughout the whole novel. Even when both she and even he kind of think he's in love with someone else, he's still kind of really careful of her and really cares about her in a really nice way, and I think that is done very well and kind of shown very subtly by Jane Austen in a way I really like. As I said in my Northanger Abbey video, I also enjoy Jane Austen's novels that are set in Bath. About half of Persuasion is set in Bath, and I reread Persuasion again while I was living in Bath, and it was really nice to just see all the places I recognised. There's also a bit in Persuasion where Captain Wentworth has an umbrella and he's like, oh, you see I'm armed for Bath already, or something like that, because in the early 19th century it rained in Bath all the time. It still rains in Bath all the time. That just kind of pleases me in a really odd way. So anyway, whenever people came into the Jane Austen Centre with an umbrella, I'd be like, oh, I see you're armed for Bath, and they'd always give me a weird look if they hadn't read Persuasion recently or at all. Anyway, I think Persuasion is very good at being kind of a quiet, tender, slower novel. I don't think it's as fast or as funny as some of her other books, but it's really sweet and lovely and just more serious, I'd say, than some of her other novels, but just done so well. I love it. I'm very fond of it. I think it's a lot of people's favourites. When I was working at the Jane Austen Centre, I used to ask like almost everyone that came round what their favourite Jane Austen novel was out of interest, and people's favourites were Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion, always. Like, those are the 2 main ones that were out in front by a mile of what people's favourites were, and I completely understand why Persuasion is so many people's favourites, even though it is not my favourite, absolutely. I love it very much. I'm just feeling really happy now, just remembering Persuasion and how beautiful it is. It's also nice because it is about second chances, and it's about a character who is a bit older and not nearly so naive as the rest of Jane Austen's characters, and a character who doesn't really see that much hope of love in her future, but kind of gets on with life anyway and is not like happy, but at least kind of content. And I really think Anne is a fascinating character. I think she might be my favourite Jane Austen heroine. Anyway, I think I've just been rambling on about the same things and a kind of gush of how much I love Persuasion. You'll be hearing even more of these in the next few days. My favourite adaptation of Persuasion is this film from the 90s, I think 1999, but it might be earlier, I might have forgotten. It's got Ciarán Hinds in and Amanda Root, and it's just so beautiful and really good. And I think it's very hard to get across Anne Elliot because she's a much quieter character, and there was an ITV film in 2008 or something which I wasn't very fond of. I didn't really like Sally Hawkins as Anne Elliot at all, but Amanda Root I think does it perfectly, and the sister Mary, her married sister, who is quite funny actually, is done really well in this, and Ciarán Hinds is great, and I just think it's beautiful. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Persuasion. I have a feeling I've just like rambled excitedly at you without really telling you anything, but hopefully you understood how much I like it. Anyway, let me know if you have read Persuasion and what you think of it down in the comments, and I'll be back tomorrow talking about a different Jane Austen novel.